The idea that freedom must be fought for and earned anchors the story of Hamilton. As a bastard orphan, son of a whore, and an immigrant, Alexander Hamilton always knew that his path to success would be an uphill slog. As he sings in Hurricane, "When my prayers to God were met with indifference, I picked up a pen, I wrote my own deliverance." He applies the same logic to the fight for America's independence, as well as the fight to make it a nation that lives up to the ideals framed in the Declaration of Independence. He understands that if people want freedom from tyranny, they will have to fight to earn it and continue working to keep it. In the song My Shot, Hamilton sings, "He ain't ever gonna set his descendants free, so there will be a revolution in this century. I will lay down my life if it sets us free." These lyrics show us that Hamilton knew the tyrant King George would never willingly give up power or control to the colonies. The only way for them to achieve freedom was to fight for it. Hamilton also believed that only those who fought and worked for freedom deserved it, as he indicates in The Room Where It Happened, when he sings, "When you got skin in the game, you stay in the game. But you don't get a win unless you play in the game. Oh, you get love for it, you get hate for it, you get nothing if you wait for it, wait for it, wait." This stanza reminds the audience of Aaron Burr's refusal to actively choose a side. Hamilton is hinting that he doesn't believe people who wait on the sidelines deserve a share in the freedom that others fought and died for.
I wrote my way out of hell, I wrote my way to revolution. I was louder than the crack in the bell. I wrote Eliza love letters until she fell. I wrote about the Constitution and defended it well. And in the face of ignorance and resistance, I wrote financial systems into existence. And when my prayers to God were met with indifference, I picked up a pen, I wrote my own deliverance.
In this clip, we see how Hamilton applied this idea that deliverance isn't delivered. It is earned through work and effort to many aspects of his life, from getting the right girl to gaining and defending national freedom. In Hamilton's world, freedom isn't free, and success isn't guaranteed. Our basic rights and freedoms must be pursued if they are to be enjoyed. As we move into the slave narratives, we see the same idea that freedom is not guaranteed but must be fought for and earned. Rare was the slaveholder who would willingly grant freedom to his slaves. Instead, if slaves wanted to enjoy their inalienable human rights, they first had to prove their humanity by throwing off the yoke of slavery themselves. It was not an easy fight, as the slaveholders willfully denied the humanity of their slaves in order to justify their bondage. Further, slaveholders had a political and financial stake in denying enslaved people the freedoms that they claimed were the right of every man. This theme is strongly present in The Heroic Slave by Fredrick. In the following quote, we're reminded that enslaved people are just as deserving of freedom as our nation's founding fathers. Let those count for it who can, but there stands the fact that a man who loved liberty as well as did Patrick Henry, who deserved it as much as Thomas Jefferson, and who fought for it with valor as high and arms as strong and against odds as great as he who led all the armies of the American colonies through the Great War for freedom and independence, lives now only in the chattel records of his native state. This passage reminds the reader that enslaved people fought and worked just as hard as free people for the independence and prosperity of America. They were therefore just as worthy of that freedom as any citizen of the young nation. Later, when we meet Madison, the heroic slave of the title, we hear him say, "Liberty I will have, or die in the attempt to gain it. These trusty legs or these sinewy arms shall place me among the free. Liberty, the inalienable right of every man, precious and priceless, will be mine. My resolution is fixed. I shall be free." In this passage, we hear the explicit contradiction between the idea of inalienable rights, which belong to every man, and the idea that those rights must be fought for before they can be practiced and enjoyed. When Madison first runs away, he lingers for a while on his master's land. After getting turned around, he finds himself outside the slave quarters. There he shows us his belief that only those who resist bondage deserve freedom, as he watches his fellow slaves seated by a warm fire, merrily passing away the time as though their hearts knew no sorrow. Although I envied their seeming contentment, all wretched as I was, I despised the cowardly acquiescence in their own degradation which it implied, and felt a kind of pride and glory in my own desperate lot. I dared not enter the quarters, for where there is seeming contentment with slavery, there is certain treachery to freedom. Madison is reveling in the suffering his freedom has brought him, because that misery is, in his estimation, worthy of pride, whereas those consenting to slavery deserve the degradation that they have accepted. Determined that miserable freedom was better than contented enslavement, Madison resigns himself to living in the dismal swamp for 5 long years, staying close enough to his wife to remain in contact, but far enough away to maintain his own freedom. Eventually he returns to his former master's land to try to free his wife. With her in slavery, my body, not my spirit, was free. This line feels like the shout echoed in Martin Luther King Jr.'s claim that no one is free until we are all free. The Heroic Slave ends with Madison comparing his actions to those of America's founding fathers. "You call me a black murderer. I am not a murderer. God is my witness that liberty, not malice, is the motive for this night's work. I have done no more to those dead men yonder than they would have done to me in like circumstances. We have struck for our freedom, and if a true man's heart be in you, you will honor us for the deed. We have done that which you applaud your fathers for doing, And if we are murderers, so were they. Madison compares his actions to the actions of the revolutionaries in the War for American Independence. He compares his fight to the fight of America's own founding fathers. His cause is the same, his actions comparable. If he is a monster or a murderer for seeking his freedom, so too were they. The movie Machete takes this theme and brings it forward into the present day. Though America claims to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, we continue to deny basic human rights to people based on superficial attributes such as their ethnicity, their native language, their gender, or their religion. Machete examines the rights being denied to the people of Mexican or Central American descent, as well as the grounds for that denial. In the movie, we see the same types of racialized lies being used against Mexicans and Mexican Americans that were once used against African American slaves. Senator McLaughlin calls them terrorists, lazy, leeches, parasites, and they are painted as criminals, drug dealers, and deviants. As the movie continues, we're introduced to a freedom fighter named She. Her desire is to help people crossing the border to access their inalienable human rights, as well as the basic necessities of life.
Are you She?
If I were She, do you think I'd be operating a taco truck? She brings hope. She rights the wrongs. Unfortunately, she's a myth.
We learn that though she is a myth, much like Machete himself, she is also a powerful symbol, a freedom fighter. The irony of having to fight for freedom in the land of the free is not lost on the audience. Luce created this myth in part to remind immigrants that they are human beings worthy of fighting for. Eventually, the lead immigration offer, Sartana, realizes that while she might be on the right side of the law, she's on the wrong side of morality. As she works to rally an army for Machete, she announces, "Yes, I am a woman of the law, and there are lots of laws. But if they don't offer us justice, then they aren't laws. They are just lines drawn in the sand by men who would stand on your back for power and glory."
Well, there's the law, and there's what's right. I'm gonna do what's right.
Even though Sartana has her freedom, she comes to realize that until everyone is free, no one is, and it is the duty of those who have freedom to support those still fighting their way toward liberty. She also realizes that she cannot fight their fight for them, and instead works to inspire them to fight for the freedom of all. Throughout this course, we see over and over again the idea that freedom is not free, that freedom must be fought for, won, and continually promoted in order to be preserved. Though our founding documents assure us that our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are natural and inalienable, in practice we see that throughout American history, people who want access to those rights must rise up and fight for them, prying them from the rigid hands of tyrannical power. By ending with Machete, this course reminds us that the American story is not over. We are still working to create a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. If we want freedom for ourselves and our loved ones, we must continue to fight for it and be worthy of it. We must continue to agitate and to resist oppression and tyranny. We must continue to exercise the freedoms we have in order to secure the freedoms of others currently denied access to the rights that our founders promised to all. In the words of John Lawrence in Hamilton, we must rise up.